Chapter 158. In the end, only the seat next to Fuzhou was empty. It was obvious who Shui Yaoyao was going to sit with. The other two girls also supported her. After all, His Highness Zhou was sitting in that corner, but the teacher didn't say a word. Some people also pretended not to see anything, and the vague sense of exclusion was still there. In school, grades were the most important thing. They all knew this. But they really didn't want to see His Highness Zhou sitting alone in the corner. The physics teacher obviously didn't understand what these students were thinking, and his voice became a bit cold. I've already made it very clear that men and women can't sit together. Shui, you should know your situation. Getting into a good university is your only way out. Don't think about those unrealistic things. Read more books when you have time. Sit down. Shui Yaoyao still wanted to say something. Fuzhou looked up and gave her a "don't worry" look. She smiled at her, which clearly meant that it was okay to sit in the back row. But this physics teacher seemed to be very prejudiced against her. If it was for studying, Fuzhou wouldn't have bothered the teacher. It was a matter of principle. She didn't know if it was because of studying with the Almighty for a whole night, but she could actually understand a little bit in this class. But the physics teacher didn't hit the main points in class. Simply put, he was a little inferior to the Almighty. Maybe it wasn't the teacher's ability, but the Almighty was too inhuman. Fuzhou once again thought about the material she had read in the Qin family study. Criminal psychology, logical reasoning, forensic general knowledge. Ordinary people probably wouldn't read these books often. While Fuzhou was deep in thought, Shui Yaoyao saw that the young man didn't look unhappy, so she calmed down. She knew that whether it was the students or the teacher, the impression of His Highness Zhou as a good-for-nothing was long ingrained. She had experienced this feeling of being isolated before, so she wanted to sit at the same table as His Highness Zhou. But obviously, His Highness Zhou wasn't her. That person had an incomparably strong heart. He never cared about being excluded or isolated. Just like now, he was holding his chin and taking notes in class, as if he didn't care where he sat. One day, when people knew His Highness Zhou's true identity, they would know that he was never a good-for-nothing. It was good to have one person at a table. Fuzhou could log into the game very smoothly, and she didn't have to deliberately avoid anyone. After all, she was using Almighty Qin's account, and it would only be troublesome if someone peeped at her. Usually, it was very difficult to find a player's exact location without adding them as friends. But to Fuzhou, this was nothing. She used her microdata control to lock onto, awarding you a slap of pleasure, and send a message through the Alliance's platform. Are you there? Chapter 159. After Feng Shang received Fuzhou's last message, he immediately stood up from his chair. She began to pick out her clothes very seriously. The last time he met his idol was too coincidental. Not like this time. Strictly speaking, they were going to have a gay meetup. Moreover, it was not a one-on-one gay meetup, but a team meetup. Although Feng Shang had never met anyone in the game, he had read quite a few novels about them. It was a team meetup, and the feeling was like he was about to see the girl he loved. Even his heart was beating faster than usual. Needless to say, Feng Shang was really excited, so much so that he went to the entrance of the internet cafe an hour earlier to wait. Anyone who had lived in the north would understand the feeling of the cold wind blowing on the face at the end of autumn, bringing with it a little pain. However, none of this could stop Feng Shang's blood from boiling. However, the driver who dropped him off came back uneasily. He rolled down the window and said, "Second young master, do you want to wait inside?" "No." Feng Shang was very insistent. "I want to give them a surprise." "Go, don't let my brother know about this." The driver had no choice but to drive the car away. If he did this twice, the boss would definitely notice. He locked the computer, pushed open the door, and walked out. Hey, little brother, what are you doing standing outside? I'm waiting for someone. Feng Shang was still stuttering. The owner of the internet cafe pushed the door open. Waiting for someone. A gay meetup. Then come in. My shop has big windows. If you stand inside, they can see you. Feng Shang's eyes widened. How did you know that I'm here for a meeting? In my internet cafe, there are 3 or 4 people meeting up every day to play hero. It's not rare for real people to play together. The owner of the internet cafe held the cigarette in his mouth and looked a little roguish. However, he managed to convince Feng Shang. At that moment, he seemed to understand why his idol had chosen to meet here. The boss was a good person. After another half an hour, when Fu Jiu walked in with Shui Yaoyao, she saw student Feng holding a cup of milk tea and stuttering with the owner. It seems like you've been doing well when I wasn't around. Fu Jiu took off her school jacket as she walked and threw it on the sofa. It was a little hot in the internet cafe, so she had to take it off. The boss looked up at the young man and said, "So it's your friend. But let me say this first, this milk tea costs money." "Sure, how much is it?" "I'll pay you after the game." Fu Jiu blinked her left eye, looking very handsome. Feng Shang was a little embarrassed. I didn't bring any cash when I came out, so, you treated me last time, so I'll treat you this time. We still have to work together later, so let's have dinner at the internet cafe. The fast food here is pretty good." Fu Jiu even complimented the person along the way. The boss had a cigarette in his mouth and was very happy. "Sure, write down what you want to eat, and I'll get someone to make it for you. Did you hear that?" Fu Jiu smiled faintly and turned her head. "I forgot to introduce you. Yao Yao, this is Feng Shang. You can also ask him to give you a punch of pleasure." Shui Yaoyao was stunned. She thought that according to the style of awarding you a slap of pleasure, in the game, he would be a tough man with a deep voice or a big, burly man who could dig feet. But who would have thought that he would end up like this? Cough. Student Feng coughed heavily and said very seriously, I've already recharged money in the game. I'll bring you to play dungeons, and I'll bring you to fly. Chapter 160. Shui Yaoyao didn't want to laugh, but she couldn't help it after hearing what he often said in the game. Okay. Feng Shang thought that this girl brought by his idol was easy to get along with. It was the first time that Shui Yaoyao met a guy who didn't mind her being fat. She felt his friendliness, and her nervousness disappeared. "I'm not good at it. Please teach me later." Feng Shang said, No problem. If you can't pass, you can use money. With me here, how can you not pass? Fu Jiu stood up with a lollipop in her mouth. She curved her thin lips, clenched her right hand into a fist, and stretched it out. "Let's go. Let's shock Zone C." Looking at the fist in front of them, Shui Yaoyao and Feng Shang looked at each other. They stretched out their hands and pressed against each other. Just like that, a dark horse team that would shock the esports selection contest was formed in the internet cafe. The 3 of them sat handsomely in a row, all wearing black headphones. Among them, Fu Jiu's fingers were undoubtedly the most beautiful. From logging into the game to accepting orders, she did it all in one go. It was mealtime, so there weren't many people in the internet cafe. Usually, there would be a large number of people entering after 8 o'clock. We're still missing one person. Fu Jiu wore headphones and looked sideways at Feng Shang. Call them on the bulletin board. Ever since the boss found out that Fu Jiu was Spade Z, he wanted to see the young man play with his own eyes. Now that he heard that they were missing one person, he put his cigarette into the ashtray and said, "Do you think I can do it?" Fu Jiu turned around and saw him. She smiled. Of course. There was another name in the team. Although it wasn't on the leaderboard, it was of a high level. It seemed like it hadn't been played for a long time. The owner of the internet cafe typed quickly, "Open it." The four of them each had their own specialties. Fujiu was the main attacker, and every move she made was fatal. She calmly commanded everyone and put them in their proper positions. In such a small internet cafe, the rhythmic tapping of the keyboard sounded. No one knew that a team was about to be born here. It was only a short half an hour. KO. First kill completed. A dazzling silver light appeared on the screen. Along with the sound of the special effects, someone who was surfing the net pushed the door open and walked in. F***CK, who got the first kill? This voice was really emotional. The owner of the internet cafe stood up and swiped his ID card to open the computer. Then, another group of people walked in. At this time, the internet cafe was completely lively. Fujiu, who originally wanted to eat here, also gave up on the idea. She glanced at Feng Shang and Shui Yaoyao and took off her headphones. Shall we find a place outside to talk? The two of them naturally agreed. There were too many people in the internet cafe, so it was inconvenient to talk. When Fujiu walked past the cashier counter, she paused and said to the owner of the internet cafe inside, "Are you interested in playing professional matches with me?" Me? Professional competition. The owner of the internet cafe choked on the smoke in his mouth. Cough, I can't take it anymore. I'm too old. Don't you see the pro players on TV? They're all young. Chapter 161. There's no need to play. The boss removed the cigarette and placed it between his fingers. With a mischievous look on his face, he said, "If it's to win a prize or something, I might consider it." Fujiu laughed. How can winning an award be enough? If we don't shock the esports world, why should we play games? Think about it. Hearing that, the owner's pupils contracted. Someone playing a game shouted, "Boss, give me a bottle of water." He's coming. With a cigarette in his mouth, the boss took out a bottle of mineral water from the fridge and glanced at Fujiu. Take me with you during the competition. Fujiu smiled. Okay. Shui Yaoyao watched the scene from the side. She didn't say anything at first, but after they walked out of the internet cafe, she said, "The boss's ultimate move was amazing. I didn't even move, and the monsters in front of me were all killed. It's a stealth expert." Feng Shang's eyes lit up when he said this. I really didn't expect the boss of a small internet cafe to be so good at playing games. Fujiu chuckled. His right fingers are more agile than his left, and when he's holding something, his index finger will subconsciously tap the side. This is a habit formed by people who play games often. He used to be in a professional team, but only he knows why he left. Idle, you couldn't have seen through him from the start. Even though Feng Shang hadn't finished his sentence, Fujiu had already understood what he meant. I noticed it the first time I came to this internet cafe. The boss was still tinkering with the computer. Otherwise, why do you think I invited you here? In the end, Fujiu's handsome face had a handsome arc. Feng Shang and Shui Yaoyao looked at each other. They were almost certain that the owner of the internet cafe felt that he had been tricked by His Highness Zhou, idle. However, to be able to determine a person's class through a single movement, this was simply too overpowered. Why are you all looking at me? Fujiu put on the black mask and put her hands in the pockets of her uniform. Her eyes were still smiling. Let's find a place to eat. Feng Shang nodded and said, It's such a cold day. Eat something warm. Why don't we go to my house and eat hot pot? Your house is a bit far, so let's go. I still need to go back and study physics after eating. Fuzhou's heart ached at the thought of this. Shui Yaoyao didn't care where she ate. She had never had the chance to eat with people in the game before. Feng Shang felt the same, and he followed Fuzhou excitedly. Just as the three of them were about to cross the road, a group of people walked over from the other side of the sidewalk. Every one of them was wearing the clothes of a professional team. They were all above the standard height, so even their aura was very strong. The one in the lead was Fuzhou's old enemy, her agent Du Zhe. Other than Du Zhe, there was also Fu Ximing. As usual, Du Zhe was like a lackey. He was dressed like a proper person and blocked the path on the left for Fu Ximing. "Young master, this way, this way." Fu Ximing also saw Fuzhou at this moment. His face was cold and arrogant, as if he didn't want to talk to Fuzhou at all. He strolled over. Chapter 162. Some people in that team knew Fuzhou. After all, some of them were from He Honghua's team. Their impression of Fuzhou had always been that useless person who only knew how to throw money at people and had no ability at all. Someone is really carefree. He still has the mood to come to the internet cafe. He's just a useless wastrel. How much do you expect him to achieve? It seems like it was right for us to leave the company. With He Honghua's love for her son, sooner or later, we will be in trouble. Shui Yaoyao knew that they were talking about His Highness Zhou. She tilted her head and looked at the young man. Fuzhou was still wearing a mask, but her deep eyes were very bright. They were like the ice in the winter, cold and bone-chilling. What kind of people are together? I heard from my classmates this afternoon that someone found a big fat pig as his girlfriend. Now it seems like it's true. Fuzhou didn't move at first. But after hearing that, Shui Yaoyao saw the young man raise his leg and kick that team member who was about to pass by them. The action was very fierce and very handsome. There was a loud bang. That team member covered his knee. He was in so much pain that his face turned pale. Don't talk if you don't know how to talk. Fuzhou's hands were still in the pockets of her school uniform. Her side profile was indifferent. At least don't talk **tu. The others in the team couldn't take it anymore. They raised their fists and were about to throw them at Fuzhou. Stop! Fu Ximing's cold voice rang out. Do you know what the consequences will be if you start a fight in front of everyone while wearing these clothes? Tomorrow, your pictures will appear in the esports tabloids. Come back, a person who can't even pass the exam is not worth your time. The team members tugged at their bags indignantly and pointed at Fuzhou. Feng Shang was still rolling up his sleeves. This was the first time he fought with his friends, so he was very proactive. I idle, do you need me to fight? No need. Fuzhou curled up her lips and smiled. It's not fun to fight them here. Feng Shang was a little confused. Then where should we fight? Did they need to jump to a place to fight? He had never fought before, so he had no idea. In the game. Fuzhou looked up. Through the mask, her voice carried the charisma of a king. Let's crush them in the esports selection contest. A gust of wind blew past, brushing away the silver hair on her forehead, revealing a faint glow. However, that group of people still didn't know that Fuzhou was Spade Z, and they were still indignant. Young Master Fu, are we going to let that kid off just like that? Did you hear what he just said? Spouting shit. It's obvious that he doesn't put you in his eyes. The team members obviously wanted to vent their anger. In the past, they didn't like that piece of trash in the company. They tolerated him for the sake of getting paid. Chapter 163. Brilliant, young Master Fu's idea is brilliant. The tallest member gave a thumbs up and glanced at the teammate next to him. The two of them had a poisonous look on their faces. That Trash's good days were about to come to an end. It was true that Fu Ximing didn't take Fu Jiu seriously. It was just that the mouse incident last time made him feel that it was time to teach her a lesson. Did she really think that he was still that illegitimate child who didn't know how to speak up after being wronged? It was time for everyone to see who the real young master of the Fu family was. Fu Ximing didn't understand at all. His Lord Jiu had always disdained to fight with him for the title of young master of the Fu family. When the team had a gay meetup, they would drink if they passed. Fu Jiu's first words were, "A dozen ice Budweisers," which was very down to earth. Feng Shang felt that ever since he followed his idol, all the firsts were gone. Like gay meetups, like fighting, like drinking. If you're not used to it, drink less. Fu Jiu's drinking posture was very evil. Feng Shang looked at it and said seriously, "Idol, believe me, I can do it." "Oh, then you drink it." After Fu Jiu said that, she stretched out her hand and said, "Boss, give me another dozen." Feng Shang froze. "Again? Tell me about everyone's good points." After Fu Jiu entered the zone, she really looked like a CEO in the business world. She dipped her finger in wine and tapped it on the table. "Feng Shang, you're fast. When the match starts, stand in this position. You're mainly responsible for defending and healing." "Yao Yao, the youth's face looked very youthful and clean, but at that moment, they felt that the youth was not an ordinary high school student. It was like a mature soul living in a young body. She didn't know why she felt this way. But the young man's orders always made people involuntarily submit to him, as expected of their Royal Highness Jiu. With such a captain, there was nothing to be afraid of even in the e-sports selection contest, where there were many experts. Shui Yao Yao smiled. Her round face was slightly red, perhaps because she was drunk or perhaps because she was full of anticipation for the competition, at this moment, in Rivertown No. 1 Middle School. A familiar black Lincoln limousine was parked at the side of the road. There were several bodyguards standing around it, each of them wearing a black Bluetooth headset for easy communication. Regardless of whether it was the car or the people, they all exuded an unapproachable aura. Even so, it couldn't stop the enthusiasm of the students at the school gate. Many girls were tiptoeing and taking pictures with their phones. The driver stood outside and glanced at the watch on his wrist. He seemed to be in a hurry. With a troubled expression, he said to the person sitting in the car, "CEO Qin, it's been half an hour. Should we leave now?" Ninth young master should have returned home by now. Qin Mo held the physics information in his hands, his long fingers tapping on it. His lips curved upwards, but his gaze was frighteningly cold. "Should?" The driver immediately said, "I'll ask again." "No need." Qin Mo casually tossed the physics book to the side, crossing his legs elegantly. His perfect side profile seemed to be coated with a layer of ice. "Come up, drive." The driver hesitated for a moment and said, "Aren't you going to wait for young Master Joe?" Chapter 164. The driver didn't dare to say anything more. He immediately turned around and got into the car. His hand holding the steering wheel was still a little unsteady. He could tell that the young master was not in a good mood. After all, he had been the Qin family's chauffeur for so long, and he had never seen the young master wait for anyone like this. In the end, the person that the young master was waiting for didn't appear. Of course, he knew that the young master was. Sigh, it was hard to say. Turn left ahead. When Qin Mo's low voice came from behind, the driver was confused. Turn left. Go straight to the Fu family. Qin Mo's eyes didn't have the slightest fluctuation, but it was so dark that it seemed like it could emit a cold mist. To the Fu family. The driver couldn't hide the surprise on his face. He glanced at the rearview mirror and said after a while, yes. But going to the Fu family without informing young Master Zhou was not in line with young Master Fu's usual style. No, that's not right. It should be said that the young master had never been to someone's house before. Why did young master want to go to the Fu family? Should he ask his wife to call the other party's wife first? But it was so sudden. They usually didn't have any contact with the Fu family, and they didn't have any contact information at all. Qin Mo didn't know what the driver was thinking. Right now, Almighty Qin's idea was very simple: catch that guy and teach him a lesson. Achoo! Fu Jiu was having a good time drinking, but for some reason, she suddenly sneezed. Feng Shang was already swaying left and right. His face was also red. Idol, how did you become two? Because you're drunk. Fu Jiu held the glass of beer and drank the last mouthful. She looked up and said, "Boss, come, check out." Shui Yaoyao was surprisingly a good drinker. She drank 3 bottles of wine and nothing happened. After Fu Jiu handed over the money, she tilted her head and said to Shui Yaoyao, "This guy should come with me. If he goes back in this state, his brother will definitely question him." I'm not afraid of my brother." Feng Shang, who was originally drunk, suddenly sobered up. I was just being obedient." Fu Jiu nodded and said half-heartedly, yeah, you're the most obedient." As he spoke, he pulled her arm over his shoulder. Dressed in his school uniform, he didn't look any less handsome. "Let's go. Hail a cab and ask the driver to go to your house first." "All right." Shui Yaoyao didn't stand on ceremony with Fu Jiu. After she hailed a taxi, she sat in the front seat and looked back at the back seat. "Your Highness Zhou, is Feng Shang okay?" Fu Jiu rubbed Feng Shang's head. "Don't worry, I'm here. All boys will react like this when they drink for the first time." Out of the 3 of them, His Highness Zhou drank the most. He had probably drunk 8 or 9 bottles, but His Highness Zhou didn't seem to have any reaction at all. This really doesn't seem like a high school student. Shui Yaoyao's house wasn't very far. After going there once, Fu Jiu was familiar with the route. After sending the girl back, she said to the driver, "Return to Xing Road." It would take some time to walk, especially since there was a drunkard sitting next to him. Fortunately, this drunkard was quite cute. His every move was acting, and he was simply a mascot. This is not the way back to my house." Feng Shang leaned against the car window, his handsome face distorted. Chapter 165. 7 p.m. at night. The sky was already dark. The northern region had started its own smog. All the roads in Jiang City entered the rush hour. In the living room of the Fu family. Ever since Qin Mo came in, Chen Xiaodong didn't know where to put his hands. He stood stiffly at the side. "You mean, your young master isn't back yet?" Qin Mo sat on the sofa, his tone calm. He took off his gloves slowly, exuding an aura of nobility. Chen Xiaodong couldn't think of a reason why young Master Qin would appear at his house. Even if his young master angered him, young Master Qin wouldn't come personally to capture him. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. Should he call his young master first? Qin Mo raised his eyebrows when Chen Xiaodong didn't reply. Chen Xiaodong felt his scalp go numb. "Yes, my young master said he was going to sleep at a friend's place last night. He hasn't come back yet. Why don't I go to the nightclub to look for my young master? Maybe he's back to his old habits?" He couldn't figure out what his young master was busy with recently. Qin Mo smiled when he heard this. "If your young master really went to the nightclub, then he doesn't need to come back today." It was originally a very ordinary sentence, but Qin Xiaodong didn't know why, but he actually heard the coldness in it. Why? Qin Xiaodong didn't understand what was wrong with going to the nightclub. After all, it was normal for his young master to go to the nightclub. I came in a hurry this time, so I didn't bring any gifts for boss he. Qi Nemo spoke again, polite and indifferent. His face was noble and handsome no matter how you looked at it. Boss he probably isn't back yet. Qin Xiaodong quickly nodded. Yes, madam is on a business trip. She'll be back in Jiangxing City in 2 days. Was young Master Qin going to leave? That was great. Even though young Master Qin was handsome, he felt pressured at such a close distance. Thinking up to this point, Qin Xiaodong decided to respectfully send young Master Qin out. However, he didn't expect this. Where's your young master's room? Qi Nemo stood up with one hand in his trousers and the other holding a physics book. Even his tone was casual. Bring me there. Qin Xiaodong, ***********, the darkness of the night grew thicker. When the taxi driver finally dropped Fu Jiu off, Feng Shang walked around in a daze. Fu Jiu grabbed him by the sleeve and dragged him into the Fu family. Fu Zhongyi took almost everything, but he didn't dare to touch the villa. Even the illiterate understood the meaning of marital property. But it was precisely because of this that San Kai refused to let her go. If she didn't enter the Fu family's door, she would never be considered a legitimate wife. Not only did the three know this, but everyone in the business world also knew this. What's more, this villa wasn't cheap. She used so many tricks to poach people from He Honghua. Apart from making He Honghua a laughingstock, there was another reason. She wanted He Honghua to run out of money and have no choice but to sell the villa at a low price. Then, she would be able to take over the villa legitimately. Fu Jiu looked at the brightly lit single-family house in front of her and smiled coldly. Anyone who wanted to destroy her home, she would let them have a taste of what it meant to burn their bones and scatter their ashes. Chapter 166. Her little butler did not even come out to greet her. Fu Jiu tilted her head in confusion. Since she was still holding on to Feng Shang, she didn't see the only Lincoln in Jiang City parked in the dark. There weren't many people in the hall. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows and went straight to the second floor. She wanted to let baby Feng wash his face first. But what she didn't expect was that as soon as she pushed the door open, she saw Almighty Qin, who shouldn't be here, holding the book that was originally on her bookshelf. His handsome godlike face didn't show any emotion. He was sitting on the wooden chair in a very lazy and luxurious posture. He was wearing a pure black suit and Italian leather shoes. His elbows were on one side, and his eyes were as cold as the autumn night outside the window. His voice was indifferent. You still know to come back. Fu Jiu paused for a moment. He did look like a big brother. She had wanted to explain, but student Feng jumped out from behind. I'll have another drink. After you drink me up, I'll go home with you to sleep. Go home and sleep. Qi Nemo repeated the 3 words and stood up with a faint smile. His eyes were cold. You're really amazing. You brought the second young master of the Feng family home to sleep with just 1 trip. No wonder you're my younger brother. Almighty Qin's words were definitely the opposite of what he meant. Fu Jiu was a smart person, so of course she wouldn't do something stupid. She smiled lightly and said, Our team gathered today, and everyone was happy, so we drank a few more glasses. I was worried about him going home, so I brought him back to my house. Brother Mo, I won't do anything to baby Feng. His big brother will ban me. I don't know if his big brother will ban you, but if there's a next time. Qi Nemo approached slowly, and even his breath hit Fu Jiu's face. It was extremely cold. I won't just break your claws, but don't even think about your legs. Hearing that, Fujio touched the bridge of her nose and glanced at the physics book on the desk. She couldn't help but be stunned. Was he going to tutor her again? Speaking of which, even if the Almighty wanted to tutor her, he would definitely go to school and not to her house. Could it be that after he went to school, he didn't wait for her and then came to her house? Only then did Fujio realize how serious the situation was. A businessman who valued time like the Almighty rarely waited for others. With the Almighty's personality, he would definitely find a way to get back at her. But Chi Nemo didn't seem to be in a hurry to deal with Fujio. He turned sideways and took out his phone. He looked at her and dialed a number with his slender fingers. Manager Fong, who was still attending the party with his team, was stunned when he saw the caller. President. When had his Almighty ever called him? He would call 5 times before the other side would pick up one. Sometimes, the Almighty would say, "Fong Yi, don't call me if it's nothing important, understand?" At that time, he really wanted to smash his phone. But now... Humph. Manager Fong coughed seriously and deliberately lowered his voice, trying to create a sense of maturity. Boss Chin, what's the matter? The person on the other side of the phone seemed to be laughing. Fong Yi, I'll give you 20 minutes to come to the Fu house and pick up your drunk brother. If he doesn't arrive after 20 minutes, you can directly buy a plane ticket and fly to South Africa. I will pack up your brother and send him to you. How about that? How about that? What kind of place was South Africa? A country where people could only eat dirt. In just half an hour, not only had young Master Chin come, but even Manager Fong had made a trip to the Fu residence. If Madam was here, she would definitely find a way to keep Manager Fong. After all, everyone in the city knew that anyone who played games would become famous in Manager Feng's hands. Of course, the best was still young Master Chin. With such a god staying at home, Chen Xiaodong felt that even the air around him was cold. Chapter 168. In the entire Fu family, only He Honghuan knew that Fujio was a girl. Even Zhang Xiaodong, who was always by Fujio's side, didn't know Fujio's true gender. This was an important secret, so even in her own house, Fujio's room wasn't filled with cosmetics like other girls. But Fujio was a girl after all. Especially the old Fujio. She had always imagined that one day she could regain her female identity. So in this room, there would always be traces of a girl's existence. In fact, Fujio was quite sensible. She knew that if people found out that she was a girl, she and her mother would be finished. But the old Fujio couldn't stand this kind of life, so she had to cover it up and vent her anger at He Honghua. So much so that she developed the habit of putting the things she secretly bought in the bedside drawer. Since her rebirth, Fujio had been busy playing games, making money, and taking revenge. She didn't have time to deal with these small things. And she didn't think she needed to deal with them. But now... Fujio looked sideways, and her fingers slid over her glowing lips. Her youthful side profile was still so beautiful that it made people's hearts beat faster. The Almighty couldn't find out, right? But Fujio forgot that there was a law in this world called Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law meant that the things people were most worried about would happen. After noticing the young man's gaze, Chin Mo followed his gaze to the bedside. With one hand in his trousers, his deep eyes were cold. You seem to have been staring at the bedside since just now. Have I? Fujio turned around in her swivel chair and smiled. Chin Mo walked over to her and bent his waist down. He placed both his hands on the table behind her in a beautiful posture. A lock of black hair fell in front of his sharp eyes, imprinted on his handsome face, adding to his arrogance and untamed nature. In an instant, the man's minty cigarette scent filled her mouth and nose. It was the same scent that occasionally emitted from his suit, quiet and cold. Fu Jiu didn't move, but raised her head with an evil smile. Qin Mo's eyes were like a deep whirlpool in the night, especially when he looked at her. The posture of the two of them was really not ordinary. So when Chen Xiaodong wanted to come in with the tea, he was scared back. What did he see? Young Master Qin was kissing their young master. He must have been mistaken. That's right, how is this possible? From the back, it was indeed an ambiguous angle. In addition, both of them were very handsome, so it was inevitable that people would think in that direction. Especially when Fu Jiu put her hands on the chair and deliberately lifted herself up. She said to Qin Mo's lips, "Brother Mo, I find you especially handsome today, really." When dealing with an opponent, there were times when it was useless to always use attacking methods. Compliments were the most useful when the other party was angry. But in the next second, he freed his left hand and lightly patted the youngster's adorable face. It was rare that he wasn't mocking her. "You have a sweet mouth, but you seem to have forgotten something." Qin Mo retracted his arm from Fu Jiu's back, and his magnetic voice continued unhurriedly, "I studied psychology." Chapter 169. At this moment, Qin Mo looked even more dangerous than usual. Usually, he would cover it up with elegance, but now, he looked at the bedside with an indescribable gloominess in his eyes. In fact, when he saw Fu Jiu bringing the drunk Feng Shang upstairs, Qin Mo's eyes couldn't warm up anymore. No matter what the reason was, it was a fact that while he was waiting for the youngster was still out drinking and having fun. Thinking of this, Qin Mo's eyes turned colder. He walked towards the bedside, and his eyes swept up before finally locking on the bottom drawer. Such meticulous and precise reasoning didn't look like someone who had only studied psychology. It was like a forensic doctor looking for evidence. Fu Jiu watched as his slender fingers pulled open that drawer with a swish. There were a few items for young girls, especially the ones for the underwear, which were very trendy. There were a few lace ones, and all of them popped out with this action. At that moment, there was only one thought in Fu Jiu's mind. That was, she was going to be screwed. No matter how indifferent Qin Mo was, when he saw this scene, he also paused in surprise. Then, he used the carbon pen in his hand to pick up one of the black ones. He looked at Fu Jiu coldly with the aura of a third-generation soldier. "I didn't expect you to have such a wide range of interests. Shouldn't you explain to me, your big brother, why do you have such things in your room?" Fu Jiu narrowed her eyes, and a light flashed through them. She walked over with a smile on her face, looking very naughty. "Brother Mo, you are a man, so you should understand. Men always have one or two female confidants." Female confidant. The smile on Qin Mo's lips became colder. He threw that thing away, and even his eyebrows seemed to be filled with disdain. "Aren't you afraid of getting sick?" Fu Jiu said it as if it were the truth. "Brother Mo, we didn't do anything. That woman only slept in my room for 2 days and left something behind. She said that it would be more convenient the next time she comes." Qin Mo's handsome and ascetic face didn't look any better because of this explanation. Instead, his eyes emitted a dark, fog-like light. He looked at the youngster and pinched Fu Jiu's chin with his fingers. He used a lot of strength, and when his fingers, which were covered with black gloves, scratched Fu Jiu's skin, it caused a series of pain. "I really underestimated your womanizing ability." The wider Qin Mo's smile, the colder the surrounding air became. "There are men and women." Fu Jiu dodged his move and smiled. "We are all friends who play together. I'll be more careful next time." "Do you think there's a next time?" Qin Mo glanced at the youngster. She was handsome, but why was she so infuriating? Fu Jiu blinked. How else could she answer? However, it was fortunate that her usual style was like this, so she could think of such a good excuse in a flash. Chapter 170. Change the sheets. Fujiu reminded the Almighty, "It's night time. Why do you need to change the sheets in the middle of the night?" Chinmo's lips were full of coldness, and he said simply, "Dirty my eyes." Okay. Fujiu remembered that the Almighty was a neat freak, so she called Qin Shaodong in. Qin Shaodong kept signaling his young master with his eyes. In his memory, young Master Qin was kissing his young master just now. He must want to know if it is true. Get a sheet and change this. Fujiu didn't understand her little butler's expression at all. Qin Shaodong curled his lips desperately. Fujiu raised her eyebrows. What's going on? Qin Shaodong wanted to give some obvious hints. But young Master Qin, who was leaning against the floor-to-ceiling window and flipping through a book, opened his mouth again. His voice was extremely deep. Take out the things in the drawer and throw them away. Things in the drawer. Qin Shaodong didn't know what they were. He watched as his young master calmly took out 2 pieces of girl's bra. Young master, how could we have these things in our house? Qin Shaodong cried out in a flash. Fujiu explained calmly, they're from a friend. Okay, take them out quickly. The Almighty and I still need to study. If they stayed any longer, her lie of taking a girl home to sleep with her would be exposed. What friend? Young master never had any friends, okay. Qin Shaodong, who was pushed out of the door, knew that his young master was fooling him. Young master didn't even look at girls in the past, so how could it be? Qin Shaodong looked down at the eye-catching clothes in his hands. Could it be that? Young master was so perverted that he started to fantasize that he was a girl because he wanted to pursue young Master Qin. Qin Shaodong's eyes widened, and his face turned very ugly. Should he tell Madame about this? No, forget it. Young master had just gotten better, and if he told Madame about such a cruel thing, Madame wouldn't be able to take it. In the room, Qin Mo was still standing in front of the window. Behind him was a thick fog. It was so cold that it seemed to seep into his eyes through the window. No matter where it was, when a man stood there, it felt like an international conference was about to be held. It was just a simple physics lesson. She didn't know how the Almighty grew up to be so noble. It made her curious about the Almighty's mother. Fujiu's mind was full of thoughts. Just as she was about to walk over and continue copying the rest of the questions, "This is the book you usually read?" Qin Mo turned the cover of the book in his hand so that the youngster could see it more clearly. His lips curved into a mocking smile. Overbearing CEO falls in love with me, sleeping with rich young masters, hunting my little sweetheart. Where does the overbearing school hunk escape? Every novel was of the same genre. Cinderella meets Prince Charming. Heh, what good taste. How could Fujiu not hear the sarcasm in that graceful voice? She said in all seriousness, my daily life is already so hard. I just want to relax when I'm reading. I don't need to think about such a book. It's just right. Chapter 172. Outside the window, the night sky became darker. Fog filled the air, and even the temperature in the room dropped a little. When Qin Shaodong came over with the hot tea, he saw that young Master Qin was tutoring his young master in physics. His face was filled with indescribable shock. He really didn't expect his young master to learn. Young Master Qin seemed to be different from what he had imagined. At first, he thought that young Master Qin was here to catch his young master and make him into meat dumplings. But now, it seemed that young Master Qin treated his young master quite well. For some reason, Chen Xiaodong thought of that kiss again and shook his head. He must have seen it wrong. Although he had never kissed before, he knew what it was like. With how calm his young master and young master Qin were, nothing should have happened, here. Qin Mo saw that the young man's attention was on the hot tea, so he pulled the back of his head and knocked on the paper on the table with his slender fingers. Dressed in a black suit and a double-breasted coat, he looked like a warlord's young master from the Republic of China period. His side profile was handsome and elegant. Fu Jiu didn't listen to him. Instead, she put down the carbon pen in her hand. She raised her arm and put it on Qin Mo's shoulder. She turned her head and laughed lightly in his ear. "Brother Mo, what do you think of my little housekeeper? He's been watching you since the beginning. I don't know about your little housekeeper, but I do know that if you insist on talking to me in this position, I will hang you outside the window and let you breathe in the haze of Jiang City." The low and hoarse voice was neither slow nor slow, with a suppressed coldness. Even his eyes were heavy. "Put your paws down." Chen Xiaodong's soul had left his body after seeing this scene before he left. What was going on? Young master. How dare he get so close to young master Qin, so close, as if they could kiss. After Chen Xiaodong went out, he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he paused in front of the door and glanced at the closed door. As if she had seen through his expression, Fu Jiu also walked out. She raised her eyebrows and looked at him. "Why are you standing here instead of getting tea and snacks?" "Young master." Chen Xiaodong grabbed Fu Jiu's arm and pulled her to the side. It wasn't easy for him to speak, so he raised his voice and said anxiously, "Young master, tell me, have you not given up on sleeping with Almighty Qin? I was wondering why young master suddenly became so fond of studying today. It turns out that you have ulterior motives. You purposely let young master Qin tutor you so that you can have a chance to get close to Almighty Qin. It's getting late, and you can let him sleep. Am I right?" At that moment, Fu Jiu didn't know how to refute. After all, the other reason she came out was to ask Chen Xiaodong to prepare a guest room for the Almighty to sleep in. "Young master, listen to me once and give up on this idea." Chen Xiaodong was anxious. "With your physique, you can't sleep with Almighty Qin." When Fu Jiu heard this, her thin lips curled up, and she smiled devilishly. "Who says I can't sleep with Almighty Qin? It's just a small case, all right." Just then, small case. I didn't know I was so easy to sleep with in your mind. Chapter 173. Almighty Qin. Chen Xiaodong looked at the tall figure that appeared at the door, and his voice trembled with fear. He only had one thought in his mind, and that was that his young master was dead meat this time. Fu Jiu was a little stunned. How could she be so precise? If she said something big, the Almighty would definitely appear. Were all people who studied psychology so good at predicting? Qin Mo lifted his eyelids casually. "Why aren't you talking? Did a cat bite your tongue? I want to hear how you are going to sleep with me." Fu Jiu turned her head, and her pupils were very serious. "I was wrong." Qin Mo crossed his arms in front of his chest, looked the young man up and down, and said coldly, "Come in." Fu Jiu put her hands in her pockets and smiled carelessly, looking a little devilishly handsome. Chen Xiaodong pulled her back. "Young master, why don't we call the police? Will young master Qin kill you?" Fu Jiu laughed. "Don't worry, the Almighty will at most get a rope and hang me outside to breathe in the smog. I'm good at fighting. Go cook some supper first, so I can still eat something before I get hung up." Chen Xiaodong, he was very seriously worried, okay. Even now, his young master was still in the mood to joke around. Why was his young master so daring? That was young Master Qin, the one who could crush a person as easily as crushing an ant. As soon as Fu Jiu walked into the room, Qin Mo held her wrist, lowered her body, and said in a low voice, "Tell me, should I hang you on a tree branch, or let you run 10 laps outside?" "Neither is good." Fu Jiu's face was always so handsome and clean that it was hard to concentrate. She smiled, showing her canine teeth. "I'm so handsome, what if the smog makes my eyes inflamed? I won't be able to pass my exams, and I won't be able to play games. Then I won't be able to be in the same team as Brother Mo." Qin Mo looked at that harmless, fair, and handsome face in front of him, and thought about it carefully. With such a face, it would indeed be a little inappropriate to stare at a pair of red rabbit eyes. But having eyes inflamed had its benefits. At least it could reduce this guy's public nuisance. If he was any crueler, he would definitely throw this kid out, regardless of whether his eyes were inflamed or not. However, since he had already been raised by him as a younger brother, he had to take good care of him. If he went out looking sickly, he would be the one to lose face. "You have a lot of excuses." Qin Mo let go of the youngster. The remaining moisture on his fingertips made him frown. As expected, he wasn't manly enough. Fu Jiu didn't say anything. She took the opportunity to return to her original seat and continued to hold her pen in her mouth. She wrote down her multiple-choice questions with a slight smile on her lips. This kind of retreating in order to advance was really effective for the Almighty. He had to use it more often in the future. Just as Fu Jiu was thinking about this, she saw the man walk over, reach out his left hand from behind her, and close the physics book in front of her eyes. His voice was neither cold nor indifferent. "That's all for today, remember a few more formulas tomorrow." Fu Jiu's silver hair stood up a little. "Memorizing formulas. A few of them will be tested." The Almighty's tone sounded like he was talking about what he would be eating tomorrow. As a poor student who had just started, Fu Jiu really couldn't understand. Tomorrow he will ask Yao Yao if all of them who are good at physics are like this. Chapter 174. Sleep. The man looked at her and raised his eyebrows. His slender fingers pulled out a few books from the bookshelf and raised them. "Have you forgotten these bedtime stories?" Fu Jiu paused, and her whole body froze. Was he really going to read it? "Brother Mo, these novels aren't suitable for bedtime stories. Whether it's suitable or not, it's not up to you to decide." Qin Mo's voice was calm. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes from his suit that didn't have a single wrinkle. He took one out and bit it between his thin lips. He tilted his head and lit it up. "I want to listen to it before I sleep today." "Fu Jiu, Almighty, you won't be able to make friends if you're so willful." "Don't want to read it." Qin Mo chuckled. "Or do you want to run 10 laps outside and take in the smog in Jiang City?" Fu Jiu reached out and took the book from the man's palm. She smiled. "I'm a cultured person, so I should read more books." "Are you educated enough to read this kind of book?" Qin Mo flicked the youngster's forehead. Fu Jiu narrowed her eyes. "Brother Mo, don't look down on our romance novels. Do you know how many girls have fallen in love and how many men have chased each other?" At this point, Fu Jiu reached out and put her hand on the man's shoulder. "Speaking of which, Brother Mo, you really should read more novels like this. It's good for you to get along with girls." "Girls?" Qin Mo's voice was neither hot nor cold. He sounded like a forensic doctor doing a professional appraisal. His side profile was still handsome and calm. He reached out to untie his tie, exuding an aura of abstinence. "Forget about such a troublesome creature. Maybe some of them are good, but some of them will always do all kinds of things to get close to the rich people in their eyes. I think you have a deeper understanding of this than I do." Fujiu knew that he was referring to the mistress, but she said, "In my opinion, women who destroy other people's families are despicable, but men who can't resist seduction and abandon their wives and children are equally unforgivable." Surprisingly, the Almighty didn't refute her words. Instead, he said indifferently, "That kind of person doesn't deserve to be a man." For the first time, Fujiu felt that Qin Mo was someone worth befriending. Even though he was black-bellied, he never used despicable means to deal with people outside of the business world. For example, when it came to her, the man had always been very lenient. Otherwise, with the Qin family's power, they could have made it difficult for her to move around in the entire Jiang city the first time they met. But the man didn't. Just like now, most of the time, men in high positions would always blame women when it came to cheating, but they didn't know that the root of the problem was also them. But the Almighty was different. In the Almighty's eyes, a man should be a man. Such a righteous outlook was just like his handsome and noble face, perfect and flawless. As expected, the Almighty was not only suitable as an opponent, but also as a friend. Fujiu had regretted exposing her identity as Spade Z too early and not playing more with men. Now that he thought about it, if he could fight side by side with the Almighty, it would definitely be a good thing. Most importantly, the Almighty was rich. But, after this discussion, she was even more certain of one thing. It was best not to let the Almighty know her true gender. Chapter 175. When Fujiu raised her eyebrows, there was a smile on the corner of her mouth. No one could tell what she was thinking. She was handsome, and all that was left was her handsomeness. In fact, this was the first time Qin Mo had met someone like the youngster. He seemed evil and did things without any rules. But psychologically, this kind of person was the most difficult to profile. Therefore, it was safest to keep such a scourge by his side. Which one should I read first? Fujiu looked at the 10 novels in her hands and found it difficult to choose. Qin Mo came back to his senses, his voice deep and pleasant. Read the one you like the most first. It was said that a person's personality could be deduced from the books they read. In the past, Qin Mo had trusted this professional theory, but now, because of the youngster, he started to doubt the complexity of human nature. Looking at the youngster, he didn't seem like someone who read romance novels. In the end, he was dumber than he thought. Fujiu really didn't read these kinds of things. She usually liked to read mystery novels, but there were still remnants of these books in her mind. She pulled out a book that she thought was funny, but in fact, it was a rich and powerful school story. This time, the Almighty was quite polite. He gestured for her to go ahead. With a demonic elegance, he crossed his legs and lay on her bed. His face was indifferent and handsome. His right hand was still wearing the black glove, revealing his fair wrist. It made people feel like he didn't belong in this world. In the past, Fujiu didn't think that her bed was small, but now that this man was lying on it, she felt like she should get a new bed. Speaking of which, the Almighty was too tall. It's a novel in the first person. Fujiu coughed softly. It's a school novel for rich families. Qin Mo lifted his thin lips, a little mocking. Where are you going, domineering school hunk? Brother Mo, you have a good memory. Fujiu leaned over and blinked her beautiful eyes. Qin Mo reached out and pinned the youngster's hat. I asked you to read a bedtime story, not to flirt. My name is Zhang Meili, and I'm a girl that you can see everywhere. Until one day, I transferred to a college called the best in the universe, the world, and China, and my dream life began. That day, I fainted in the forest while walking. Then, someone appeared, and he was very handsome. His name is Rich Ouyang. Hearing this, the man probably couldn't help it anymore, and his thin lips hooked up into a sneer. Ouyang is rich? Name? Brother Mo, don't worry, the story has just begun. So this Ouyang Yuqian is rich. He's none other than the only son of the dean of the most powerful college in China. He knows how to build spaceships, and he even has a satellite at home. After he saw me faint, he gave me a pile of gold bricks and told me to buy something to eat. But I'm so kind, cute, and pure, how could I take his money? It was Ouyang Yuqian's first time meeting a girl who would reject him like me. From then on, he started circling around me. Although there were many people who liked me, lining up from my class to the school gate, I couldn't bear to reject him, so I agreed to date him for a few days. Pa Chin Mo reached out his hand and pressed the book in Fu Zhou's hand. His voice was indifferent. Buying food with gold bricks. Are you sure you can buy it? Chapter 176. Chin Mo looked at the youngster in front of him. Normal. Even though I had never read such a novel, I knew that this was not normal. Was it on purpose? How could this be? Fu Zhou didn't admit it. She opened the book calmly and smiled wantonly. Look, this is what's written here. Fantasizing that all men in the world only love their own novels. Chin Mo's slender fingers tapped on the sentence, although there are many people who like me. They line up from my class to the school gate. His eyes turned cold. Fu Zhou replied lazily, that's nothing. Every time Brother Mo goes to school, the crowd is bigger than this. Even the school leaders line up to see you, so it's not strange. In that instant, Chin Mo felt a little speechless. There was still a smile on Fu Zhou's thin lips. Finally, there was a topic that could make the Almighty choke. She wanted to continue. How could Chin Mo allow the youngster to poison his nerves again? Just hearing the name Ouyang Yuqian made him want to close the book. Looking at the youngster's expression, he arched a brow. Very proud. Nope. Fu Zhou chuckled. She finally knew the weakness of a straight-A student. The Almighty, who studied psychology, couldn't stand Mary Sullivan the most. Chin Mo reached out and pinched the youngster's chin. His eyes darkened. You're smiling so much that your canine teeth are showing. How can you say you're not proud? Crack. Li Xiaodong did not expect to see such a scene as soon as he came in. His hand trembled and the bowl fell. He really didn't expect that young Master Qin would teach his young master a lesson by kissing. Chen Xiaodong swallowed hard. That posture was clearly a sign of kissing. What's the matter? What's more, the person asking the question wasn't their young master, but young Master Qin. That kind of devilish and handsome side profile made it easy for people to think the wrong way. No. Chen Xiaodong didn't have much confidence. Then, he thought of something and said, My young master asked me to prepare a guest room for young Master Qin. I've already prepared it. Young Master Qin, do you want to rest there? Or wait a bit, Fu Zhou really didn't understand why his little housekeeper was stuttering like baby Feng. Was he scared by the Almighty? Guest room. Chin Mo lifted the corners of his eyes. Who said I wanted to stay in the guest room? Chen Xiaodong paused. Where else should I live? I'll share a room with your young master, Chin Mo said casually. Chen Xiaodong's jaw dropped as if he was struck by lightning. Sleep in the same room. What? Is there a problem? Chin Mo held a cigarette between his fingers and flicked it into the ashtray. His gaze was as calm as water as he glanced at him. Chen Xiaodong's heart skipped a beat when he saw that look. He didn't even look at his young master's expression and immediately said, Of course there's no problem. I'll go get another pillow for young Master Qin now. Chen Xiaodong really didn't think that the two of them would sleep together. He felt that it was inappropriate, but he really didn't dare to disobey young Master Qin's order. Most importantly, this was an opportunity for the young master. Chapter 177. Fu Jiu glanced at him with a cold smile. I really have to thank you for your understanding. Starting tomorrow, your salary will be halved. Chen Xiaodong. Why did young master still deduct his salary after he did the right thing? Why? When Fu Jiu threw the quilt on the bed, she felt helpless. She really had a stupid teammate. She had to control the little butler's messy thoughts in the future, or it would be too dangerous. Brother Mo, you can sleep in my room. I'll sleep in the guest room. Fu Jiu turned her head and smiled at Qin Mo. I've been drinking, so I have a strong smell on me. You probably can't get used to it. Qin Mo pulled back the young man who was trying to escape. He grabbed Fu Jiu's arm and pressed him against the wall. His handsome face was so close that there was no room for a third person. What? You don't want to sleep in the same bed with me? Such a straightforward question was a little hard to answer. Any random girl can sleep in your bed. Why can't your brother? Qin Mo said this in a very low voice. There was no warmth in his deep eyes. Fu Jiu was very clear that she had to answer at this moment. Of course. Then wash yourself clean before you go to bed. Don't let me smell any alcohol on you. Or do you prefer to shower with me? Qin Mo didn't wear a tie, and 2 buttons on his shirt were unbuttoned. His black hair matched his handsome and fair face, and his presence was especially strong. He had an extremely lazy expression, as if saying, take your time to choose, I'm not in a hurry. Fu Jiu knew that she couldn't escape this time, so she smiled handsomely. Brother Mo, shower first. I'll make the bed. No matter what, she had to find a thicker quilt, or it would be dangerous. Showers usually didn't take long. When Qin Mo came out, Fu Jiu had almost finished arranging the bed. She deliberately placed a plush toy in the middle to prevent the same situation from happening when she woke up the next morning. The Almighty didn't find fault with her. Fu Jiu took the towel into the bathroom. After locking the door, she began to take off her school uniform and bandages. She took a hot shower, changed her clothes, and walked out. His hair wasn't washed, but it was still damp. His messy silver hair would only make people feel that it was luxurious. Fu Jiu didn't like wearing slippers, especially after her shower. She casually stepped on the wooden floor and walked over with a smile on her face. It was an ordinary action, but when she did it, she looked very handsome. A long time ago, Qin Mo had already felt that the youngster was extremely fair. Now, when he looked at the pair of bare feet, they were like porcelain jade. Even his nails had been trimmed to a smooth and glossy sheen. His eyes couldn't help but sink before he shifted his gaze away. After the experience of sharing the same bed last time, Fu Jiu naturally turned off the lights and lay down. He wasn't sure if it was because the lights were off, but the faint aroma of alcohol and the sweetness of the shower gel gradually became clearer with the youngster's breathing. It seemed to brush against his left ear, but the youngster didn't notice. He smiled at him. Brother Mo, do you want me to read you another bedtime story? Chapter 178. Because of this thought, Qin Mo frowned heavily. His dark eyes were so deep that they seemed to reflect the light in the room. Seeing that Qin Mo didn't say anything, Fu Jiu wanted to take a closer look. Unexpectedly, as soon as she moved, the man pressed her down with one hand. He was on top of her, holding her wrist with his fingers, and his breath was a little hot. Except for the faint light outside, it was dark everywhere in the bedroom. That was why Qin Mo's eyes looked even colder and deeper. He was like a vigilant beast, exuding a dangerous and beautiful luster when hunting. The two of them were so close that Fu Jiu could clearly see the excessively long eyelashes on the man's face. He just looked at her, his eyes like the deep well water, tempting her to fall in if she wasn't careful. "If you move again, you'll get out. Now close your eyes and sleep." His fingers seemed to have exerted a little more force, and even his voice was filled with a deep warning. Then, Fu Jiu was pressed against Qin Mo's chest. In an instant, the man's minty tobacco smell seeped into her nose. It was familiar yet strange. She was half a head shorter than the man, and her eyes fell on his perfect jawline. She could even see his Adam's apple moving slightly when he spoke. Being pressed in the man's arms like this, she really couldn't move around. Luckily, she put a plush toy on the bed, which could put some distance between the two of them, but Qin Mo only felt that the person in his arms was very soft, like soft cotton candy. Even the smell was so sweet that it made him want to use a little more strength to crush the young man. Even though this thought was wrong, Qin Mo couldn't control his intuition. Luckily, the young man was quiet, and the head in front of his chest was very obedient. He was different from all the people he had interacted with before. The young man not only looked good, but also smelled good, so Qin Mo didn't dislike this position. Instead, he felt that it was a good way to sleep. Whether it was the touch of his hands or the smell of his breath, they were all good for sleep. The night was getting darker and darker, and it was already dawn. The scene of two equally handsome people sleeping on the bed was very beautiful, especially when Fu Jiu's silver hair contrasted with Qin Mo's black hair, creating a stunning effect. If there was a cameraman here, he would definitely take a picture of them. Such a scene would definitely attract countless fans on TV. As the sun rose, Fu Jiu slowly opened her eyes. She reached out and rubbed her left eye. 2 or 3 strands of her silver hair were sticking out. She tilted her head and looked to her side. The Almighty was still sleeping. That face that could turn all living things upside down was noble, elegant, and superbly crafted. He just lay there quietly, with his slender hands folded elegantly in front of his chest. His long and thick eyelashes cast a dark shadow, and his entire body exuded an aura of nobility that no one could approach. His slightly curled lips seemed to be filled with indescribable mockery towards them, the slacker students. The more Fu Jiu looked at him, the more she felt that when God was creating things, he must have treated the Almighty as his own son. She reached out her hand, wanting to poke the man's bewitching face. But in the next, she felt. And felt. Of something, she. Mo, God, to say, God, and. Came. Chapter 179. Auntie, why did it have to come today? Fu Jiu looked at the blood-stained pajama pants, and her eyes darkened. She tore them off and rinsed her body with hot water. Her lower abdomen warmed up, but she couldn't find anything to protect herself with, so she simply folded a layer of soft paper to replace it. But she wasn't sure if the bed sheets were dirty. Fu Jiu looked at herself in the mirror with pale lips and frowned. This thing came at the right time. But she was also glad that it wasn't when the Almighty was tutoring her yesterday. Otherwise, she would have been caught red-handed, and she would have been in deep trouble. Fu Jiu pulled out the skincare products on the side, took out a stick of men's lip balm, and applied it on her lips, just to make herself look less pale. Fu Jiu's face was pale, but she didn't look as pale as before. At this moment, Qin Mo opened his cold and deep eyes because of the noise in the bathroom. He lifted the quilt and narrowed his eyes. What's this? Blood stains. In the bathroom, Fu Jiu looked at her long legs and wiped them with a piece of tissue. She put on her school pants and glanced at the residue in the wastebasket. Since she wasn't sure if there were any on the bedsheets, she might as well leave these things in a more obvious way. Thinking of this, Fujio took a piece of tissue and stuffed it into her nose. After she felt that it was enough, she walked out of the bathroom. As soon as she walked out, she saw the man's deep eyes staring at the dirty bed sheets. His side profile was dangerous. Fujio walked over naturally and yawned lazily. "Brother Mo, my nose is bleeding. Did it stain your clothes?" Mo turned back, looking at the youngster's slightly curled silver hair and that innocent face. He then noticed that there was a piece of tissue stuffed in his red nose. He frowned and pulled him over. "Why is your nose bleeding?" Maybe it was because he had just woken up, but the man's voice was deep and lingering. Fujio could actually hear the concern in his voice. She curled her thin lips and said, "It's probably because of the exams and the esports competition, so I'm a little hot. Plus, the weather hasn't been good lately, and the smog is so thick that it's like this. I just bled a lot, and I couldn't stop it. I was afraid that Brother Mo would find it dirty." It had to be said that our Lord Joe's extremely lethal face looked exactly like whatever he pretended to be. "You are my little brother." Mo's voice was very calm. He reached out his hand to press on the back of Fujio's head, as if he was going to stop the youngster's bleeding himself. Fujio raised her hand to block his view. What a joke. If the Almighty took a closer look at her, he would definitely know that she was lying. She knew better than anyone how hard it was to fool a man like this. "Don't look dirty, the bleeding has stopped." Fujio covered her nose and smiled lightly. "Brother Mo, don't worry." Mo listened to the youngster's low and muffled voice and suddenly felt that he wasn't a good brother. He had already said that he would take good care of him, but such a situation still happened. Fujio didn't know what the Almighty was thinking, but no matter what, the bloodstain incident was finally explained. But for the next 3 days, it was best for her to stay away from the Almighty. Her body was on the cold side, so it wasn't easy for her to move around when she was on her period. Chapter 180. The pain in her lower abdomen was still there, but no one could detect the change in Fujio no matter who looked at her. Just like Mo said, people like Fujio were the most difficult to understand. During breakfast, there was a big plate of fruits on the table, and most of them were pears. Qin Xiaodong leaned over and whispered to her, "Young Master Qin had these delivered directly from the hotel. He said that young master is suffering from internal heat, so eat more of these." He swore he didn't think too much. But what happened last night that made young master suffer from internal heat? Fujio raised her eyebrows and looked at the fruit plate in front of her. Pears were cool. All women knew that this kind of fruit was the worst thing to eat during menstruation. Fujio didn't even dare to drink cold water during this period, let alone eat pears. But this time, Fujio pinched a piece with a smile and put it in her mouth. "Not bad, it's delicious." "Thank you, Brother Mo." Mo retracted his gaze from the young man's face and asked someone to bring up another bowl of soup. The effect of the soup was the same. All the effects were to reduce internal heat and remove the haze. There were lilies in the soup, so Fujio really didn't want to drink it. But with the Almighty's cleverness, it wasn't as if he didn't realize it, and he would react later. So she had to put on a show. Fujio raised her head and drank the cold soup. Mo watched the young man finish drinking, so he could see Fujio's hesitation. He raised his eyebrows. "You don't like lilies?" "I rarely eat them." Fujio curled her lips. "I'm a picky eater." Mo nodded, his voice calm. The rebellious phase of youth. Fujio. What did this have to do with rebellious youth? After eating the snow pear and drinking the lily soup, her eyes became much brighter, and she wasn't afraid of the haze anymore. But her lower abdomen was so painful that she didn't want to move at all. This was also what she couldn't let the Almighty find out. Plus, there was a physics class in the morning. If the teacher didn't take attendance, it might affect the results of this monthly test. After breakfast, Fujio stood up with one hand in her school uniform pocket. She smiled faintly, and she didn't look any different. Chinemo took her to school, and before he left, he told the driver, "Bring the fruit plate and cold soup to young Master Joe again at noon." "Yes." The driver nodded. Fujio listened on the side. She had already decided to give away the lunch that the Almighty had given her. She absolutely could not touch those two things again. She was in so much pain right now. Before her lips turned completely pale, Fujio pushed the car door open and got out. She waved at Chinemo and waited until the car behind her disappeared completely. Only then did Fujio stretch out her hand to cover her stomach. Her silver hair hung down, covering her beautiful eyes. Because it was done through the school uniform jacket, many people thought that the young man was having a stomachache. However, the young man's back was still very handsome, and the way he carried his school bag on one shoulder made many girls want to go up and talk to His Highness Joe. However, it was obvious. Fujio wasn't in a good mood today. After she entered the classroom, she put on her school uniform's hood and laid on the desk at the back, revealing only the side of her extremely pale face. A few girls glanced behind them. "Is Highness Joe sick?" "I think so." Chapter 181. Why don't we do it today? Anyway, young Master Fu said that as long as we bring that arrogant pervert to him, he will give us a lot of benefits. Think about it, how disgusting that pervert is. Not only does he like men, but he sits at the same table with that fat pig. His grades are terrible, and he's pulling down the average score of our class. When he walks, he doesn't seem to care about us at all. It's so funny. Why doesn't he take a look at what he used to be like? How dare he flirt in front of us? The person who spoke had been holding a grudge against Fujio for a long time. Now that there was a chance, he would of course incite others to do it. He couldn't wait to see Fujio kneel on the ground and beg for mercy. She dared to kick him in the classroom in front of so many people. She was simply courting death. "All right, we'll listen to you. After the physics class is over and the people in front of the classroom have left, I'll block the back door, and you guys block the front door. This time, we'll let him have a taste of what it means to never return." Just like that, a premeditated plan was quietly born. No one knew that in the classroom, a few people had already decided to plan a nasty kidnapping. Fujio only felt uncomfortable. Every girl knew what it felt like to have her period. Her lower body was moist. She really wanted to go to the bathroom, but it wasn't safe for her to go there in this state. Plus, she was really in pain and tired. Soon, her forehead was covered in a thin layer of sweat. During this time, Shui Yaoyao came to the back of the classroom. Seeing Fujio's restless sleep, she thought of a way to get some hot water for her. When Fujio raised her head, the corner of her mouth was still curled up. Because she had just woken up, her voice was a little hoarse, deep and pleasant. "What's wrong?" He looked very handsome. Because of his illness, the young man's skin was even whiter, which made him look like a handsome prince in distress. It was heart-wrenching. Perhaps only the young man could still look so good in this state. "Your Highness Joe, if you really don't feel well, why don't you lie down in the infirmary for a while and let the doctor take a look?" Shui Yaoyao said worriedly. Fujio shook her head. "I'm fine. She can't see the school doctor in this state. It will be easy for others to notice. Then drink some hot water first." Shui Yaoyao knows that no one can change the young man's mind. Fujio took the hot water and said with a smile, "Thank you." It was probably because of the hot water. Although his stomach still hurt, at least he didn't feel cold. It was just that her body was extremely tired. Fujio sat in the back and fell into a half-awake state again. She finally made it to the fourth period of physics class. No matter how uncomfortable she felt during this class, she couldn't fall asleep. She carelessly supported the side of her face with her left hand, and her right hand was under the desk, pressing a book against her stomach. It was impossible to tell why she was in pain from her pale side profile. The physics teacher's view of Fujio was the same as usual. In fact, this person was the same whether she studied or not, and she didn't expect her to get good grades. Chapter 182. Physics class was very difficult for Fujio. Even though she had put a layer of paper on her, the dampness was still very obvious. But she still remembered what the physics teacher said. At least she marked out the range so that the Almighty could help her guess the questions. But the more time passed, the more Fujio's stomach hurt. She had no choice but to lie back on the desk. In a daze, she fell asleep again. The physics teacher didn't call Fujio. Just like that, the class was over for lunch break. Shui Yaoyao looked at the young man, took out the money from her bag, and ran downstairs. She wanted to buy some medicine for Fujio's stomach pain and bring back some food for Fujio to eat while she was at it. A few girls looked back at Fujio a few times, and only left after they were sure that the young man was only asleep. It was lunch break, after all. There were still 2 hours before the afternoon class, and most of the students in the classroom went to the canteen. There were also 2 or 3 students who loved to study. They buried their heads in the classroom and did the test papers. After all, the monthly test was coming. One more test paper meant one more mark. If they could ask their classmates to bring food, they would try their best to do so. This way, they could save time. But today, these 2 or 3 students were forced out by a group of guys with their eyes. The leader closed the front door of the classroom, looked at Fujio, who was the only one left in the classroom, and winked at the people around him. Fujio was still lying on the desk. Her silver hair fell down, and only her white chin could be seen. Fujio was probably very sensitive to danger, and she suddenly opened her bright eyes. When she saw the pair of Nike sneakers in front of her, Fujio's left hand paused on the desk. She looked up at the people in front of her and slowly straightened her back. As she stood up, her eyes didn't forget to look at the back door. Her lower body was very uncomfortable, but her mind was extremely clear, and it even automatically formed an analysis. There were a total of 6 people in the classroom. There were 2 at the front door, 2 at the back door, and 2 holding wooden sticks. Their eyes were fixed on her, and the wooden sticks kept hitting her palms. It was obvious that they were here for revenge. And it was an organized and premeditated revenge. This matter was by no means simple. Fujio narrowed her eyes and curled up the corner of her mouth. She looked at the person at the front. Even though his lips were pale, he didn't seem embarrassed at all. Instead, he put one hand in his pocket and smiled wickedly. What? Lu Zhongming, was it not enough that I kicked you that day? You! Go to hell, you perverted gay. The boy named Lu Zhongming seemed to have been provoked. He raised the wooden stick in his hand and swung it at Fujio. But what he didn't expect was that the moment the stick landed, Fujio dodged and raised her leg, kicking hard on his knee. Lu Zhongming was in so much pain that his face turned pale. In an instant, he knelt on the ground. The surrounding people were all dumbfounded. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and do it. Lu Zhongming hugged his knees, gritted his teeth and growled, think about the benefits young Master Fu has given us. Young Master Fu. Even though she was extremely uncomfortable, Fujio didn't let go of this very important piece of information. It turned out that the illegitimate son was the main culprit. Fujio bent down and dodged another incoming stick. Chapter 183. Thinking of this, Fujio glanced at the back door. After seeing Fujio's gaze, Lu Zongming quickly shouted at the two people at the back door, "This perverted gay wants to run, lock the door." But he didn't expect that Fujio didn't run to the back door. Instead, she picked up the broom in her hand and used the inertia of her body to whip two people in the right ribs. It was so painful that the two of them screamed out loud. The remaining four on the side swung their wooden sticks at Fujio. But at this moment, Fujio turned around and jumped onto the window next to her. She was so fast that it was as if a gust of wind had blown past her. When she jumped down, she didn't forget to push the wooden table back, and she slammed into the person who was following closely behind her. Then, Fujio braked hard with her right heel and tapped on the ground. Her white school uniform was like a pair of wings that spread out, making the young man look more than just handsome. Class 1's classroom was on the first floor, so it wasn't hard to jump out of the window. But there weren't many people who could do it as beautifully as Fujio. Lu Zongming also wanted to jump out of the window, but he was too strong, so he was squeezed by the window. He stared at Fujio outside the window, his heart burning with anger. F***ck. They had sent 7 people, but not only did they not gain the upper hand, but they were also beaten up to this state. Lu Zongming looked back and saw that he was half limping. The others were lying on the ground in disarray, and the pain was unbearable. That gay. How could he be so good at fighting? Wasn't he not feeling well today? Fujio was indeed in pain. Not only was she sweating profusely from the pain in her abdomen, but because of her movements just now, waves of coldness swept through her entire body. And she was 100% sure that her school uniform pants were really dirty. Fujio touched her back and opened her hands. They were all sticky to the touch. Any girl would know what this meant. But she, who had just jumped out of the back window, didn't notice that someone was standing behind her. This person had witnessed the whole process, including the scene where Fujio was surrounded, and the large pool of blood on the back of Fujio's pants. This person was none other than Shui Yaoyao, who had bought the stomach medicine for Fujio. She stood there, staring at the smear of red, and could not help but be stunned. That kind of place was definitely not the place to be injured. They had always thought that Highness Joe was pressing his stomach because of a stomachache. Now, Shui Yaoyao thought, she finally knew why His Highness Joe was lying on the table like that, plus His Highness Joe's refusal to go to the infirmary. Many details added together, it seemed more and more like an answer. But no matter how much he knew, it couldn't compare to a girl's understanding of a girl. Some things, as long as it was a girl, they would understand at first sight. His Highness Joe, Shui Yaoyao couldn't say the shocking answer. The bowl of noodle soup in her hand fell to the ground. After hearing the noise, Fujio quickly turned around, and her thin eyes met Shui Yaoyao's shocked face. Shui Yaoyao looked at the young man in front of her. He was still so handsome, so clean and handsome that people couldn't look at him directly. He had a habit of never zipping up his school uniform. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.